Good afternoon, everyone. I'm Michael. I'm going to be your host for round about the next 45 minutes. Welcome along to our webinar. This is one of our webinars from the VAT Proficiency 2025 series, session number 7. We've also got the quiz session, which will be running tomorrow afternoon and also on Friday morning. So do come along to that one as well if you need it to either just test your knowledge or if you need it to qualify for the digital badge. So 2 sessions you're going to attend for that one. Today though, or this afternoon, we're looking at correcting VAT transactions. So we're going to be looking at sort of when you make corrections, what are the impacts, what happens, and how does that feed through to your VAT return if necessary. So a lot of confusion surrounding corrections. So we just want to try and clarify it a little bit today. But just before we get started, a little bit of housekeeping, just as usual. Useful for those of you that have either never attended a webinar before or maybe not attended for quite some time. So you don't need a microphone for these sessions. If you do have one, it will be muted. That'll be done automatically. You can't unmute yourself. Any questions, as normal, pop them into the questions panel. We're joined by Abby and Tina. They'll be on hand to help answer those questions. So you may get a straightforward answer depending on your query. It may be just pointing in the right direction. It may be a link to one of our Help Center articles. Just depends on the nature of your query. Keep them coming, keep them busy. We'll try and pick those up throughout. If anyone wants a copy of today's slides, then they are available to download via the handout option. Usual 2 versions available, full color version and what we term the print-friendly version where all the colors being stripped out of it. As usual, the session is being recorded. A link to the recording in case you need a bit of a recap or you want to share it with your colleagues. That will be included on your follow-up email, which will be sent out round about an hour after we've finished the session. The follow-up email will also include the link to our webinar registration page. So if you haven't yet attended that quiz and you're looking to, then just watch out for that follow-up email. But it includes all of our other sessions as well. They're all free to attend, and also a link to our recordings page as well. So well over 100 different topics on there if you are interested. Right. This is our VAT Proficiency 2025 webinar series. To earn the digital badge, you must have attended 5 of the 7 topics and also one of the quiz sessions. So we're actually running this in July. We're running these as a repeat. The sessions were so popular in June, we thought we'd repeat them. It gives people a chance who did attend in June but maybe didn't quite achieve the badge. Give them the opportunity to qualify for that and build up the right number of sessions. But this is what we've been covering. So it is session 7. We may run these sessions again in the future, but the recordings will be available otherwise. As I say, the quiz tomorrow afternoon at 2 or Friday morning at 11 if you are interested in coming along to that one. Right, this is what we're covering today. So we're going to look at editing a transaction. So what does that look like? Does it matter what you edit as well? Also, we're looking at deleting transactions as well. So what are the impacts on that? And does it vary depending on the status of the transaction? We'll be looking at VAT journals. So if you need to post journals to impact on the VAT, how do you go about doing that? We'll be looking at the make adjustments option. I would imagine not many of you will actually use the make adjustments option. It's available on step 2 of the VAT return wizard. It's one of those that you're only likely to use if you've been instructed to do so by our support team, more likely by your accountant, or maybe you've received some advice from HMRC that maybe you've made an error on a previous declaration on your VAT return. You also might use it if you are on something like, say, the partial exemption VAT scheme. Then you need to do manual adjustments as part of your VAT return when you're working through that. So we'll be looking at that one, how it also impacts the VAT area. And then just right at the end, we'll explain more about the additional support. And if there are any outstanding questions, then we'll try and pick those up at the end. Quick question from Maxine there. If you missed the quiz, can you do it at a later date? You can do that at a later date, so you can watch the recording, but it doesn't count towards the qualification of the badge. So that's stipulated on the registration page, that one. You must attend the live sessions. Similarly for email addresses, if anyone needs those changed or anything like that, we tend not to change them. We can in extreme circumstances, but you need to register with the email address that you want the badge issued to. That will be done via email towards the end of next week. Right, okay, let's get started then. So let's start with editing a transaction. Now, when we come to edit transactions, so when you're highlighting that transaction either from the transactions list or from within the likes of, say, your customer activity, your bank activity, nominal activity, you've got that edit option, and there's different fields attached to a transaction. So there's what we term critical fields, which basically link the transaction to something. So links it to a customer account, or a supplier account, bank account, nominal, the date of the transaction, the value, the tax code, possibly exchange rate if using foreign trader. So those are what we term the critical fields. Non-critical fields are, I suppose, what you would term the text-based fields. So details, reference, X reference, payment reference if there is one. So those text-based fields, those are what you would term the non-critical fields. Now, the distinction between the two will determine what happens when you edit a transaction. So if we edit a transaction and it isn't yet reconciled for VAT purposes, what will actually happen, I'll obviously show you this in the demo in just a moment as well. But if you edit what you term a non-critical field, so one of those text-based fields, and you save the changes, the transaction itself will simply update. Nothing else needs to happen in the software. So if you've made a typo in the detail, or maybe you've put the wrong reference, you need to change it, or maybe you didn't enter a reference at the time. So if you update that, it just updates the original transaction. That's all that happens when it's a non-critical field. When it's a critical field, such as the date of the transaction or the value, then what will happen, as long as that transaction hasn't been yet VAT reconciled, so you haven't included it on a VAT return yet, so what will happen there is the original transaction will update with the required details. So let's say you update the date, the original transaction on your transactions list, that will update with the new details, and a copy of what was originally entered will be added on to the end of your transactions list, or what we refer to as your audit trail. But it will show in red, and it will say deleted, and it will say CTRAN, and it will have the reference to the original transaction number. So what we'll do is we'll just quickly run through that one. I'll show you a quick example. So I'll just share my screen. Actually, make sure I've got the right one. Yeah. So if we just pop into customers, and I'll just pop on a batch invoice. So again, doesn't really matter about the information at this point, but I'll pop a value in there, and I'll save that transaction. So if we pop into transactions, you can see I've got virtually nothing entered other than that one transaction that I've just added. Now if I go into edit that transaction, and what I want to do is, I haven't entered a reference. So if I just put 123 as the reference, and I'm just going to save that. So remember that reference is what we term a non-critical field. So if I save that, do you wish to post these changes? Yes, I do. And that's it done. So you can see the reference has been updated there. So nothing else gets posted. Nice simple correction, probably as you'd expect that one. But what happens when it's what we term a critical field? So let's say I want to change the date of this transaction. It's currently dated with today's date, but let's say that should have been the last day of last month. So we'll edit it. I'll change the date. So So I'll just put it back to the 30th of June. Save the transaction. Do you wish to post these changes? Yes, I do. And this is what we've now got. That original transaction that I entered, it's updated to the 30th that I've just added. And what we've now got is this transaction here does appear in red if I click off it, but the one in red, this transaction, it has the details of what was originally entered. So it's dated the 9th of the 7th, but it says deleted, see transaction 1. So it refers back to the what we term the order trail number, the transaction number. Obviously, really obvious when you've got so few transactions, but when you've got thousands, if not hundreds of thousands of transactions, it makes it a little bit easier. So you've got that reference should you need it. Now that transaction in red, it doesn't do anything as far as VAT is concerned. So it's just a copy of what was originally entered. You can see in the VAT column over here, it's got a dash indicating it's not applicable to the VAT return. So when we run the VAT return, transaction number 2 is not going to be included. It doesn't need to be. There's no VAT element to that one. It's just a copy for audit purposes more than anything. So that's the difference between editing what we term a non-critical, the text-based fields, and the critical fields. But what we looked at there was when the transactions aren't VAT reconciled. Now, if we go back to the slides, and this time we're going to take a look at similar transactions to say, well, what happens if the transactions are reconciled? So we've entered an invoice and we need to amend it and it's been included on a VAT return. What then happens? Now with a non-critical field, pretty much the same as what we've just looked at. It just updates the original transaction. It's non-critical, so it can do that. So again, typos, adding a reference, updating the details, anything like that, where it's text-based, that's fine. It just updates the original transaction. But when it's a critical field, such as, again, maybe changing the date, changing the account reference, value, along those lines, what the software will do is it will post a reversing transaction. So let's say you've got an invoice, you've accounted for that on a VAT return, so you've declared that VAT, but something has changed on that transaction. What the software would do is it would reverse it. So it adds that transaction automatically to the end of your transactions list. So it'll say cancel, rather than deleted, see transaction, whatever, it'll say cancel, see transaction 1. Now that transaction doesn't appear in red because it's a live transaction, it's an active transaction. It needs to reverse the effects of the original. So in this case, it posts an SC, sales credit, does it automatically. And then what it will do, it will add another transaction for the details that you changed it to. So it's essentially taking a copy of the original that was reconciled, adds that to the end of your audit trail, your transactions list, and then it shows the corrected details, as it were. So let's just quickly show you that one as well. So if I go back to my screen, just to avoid any complications and any confusion, what I'll quickly do is I'm just going to rebuild this set of data. So I'm going to knock all the transactions out. So I'll just OK that and that. So I should be back to a blank company. If I pop into transactions, you can see there's nothing there. So if we go back to customers, and I'll enter a batch invoice. Again, we'll do similar. I'll just do it for £100 plus VAT. Save the transaction. Close out. And then what I'll do is I'm going to run a VAT return. Now, obviously, you'd normally run your VAT return generally on a quarterly basis. All I want to do is I want to include that transaction just so I can show you what it looks like when a transaction is VAT reconciled. So I'm going to ignore the dates for the purpose of this demonstration. I'll just calculate. It should find that one transaction. So I'll just OK that. And what I'll do is I'll reconcile it. So I'll flag the transactions. I'll close out of that VAT return. And if we go back to the transactions list, you can see in the VAT column, it's got an R indicating that transaction is reconciled. So we've accounted for that on a VAT return. Now, if we now go to edit a transaction, and again, reference, I'll just put 123. Remember, reference is a non-critical field, so we'll save the changes. Do you wish to post these changes? Yes, I do. And the only thing that happens with it being a non-critical field, it updates the original. So nothing else needs to happen at that point. If we go in and this time, I'm going to change a critical field. So we'll pick on the date again. So I'll just move it back again. So let's move it to the previous month. And I'm going to save that. So do you wish to post these changes? Yes, I do. And what we've got this time, you can see the date. Essentially, that transaction is locked. It's been VAT reconciled. It's appeared on the VAT return. So if we'd printed out things like the detailed VAT report, for instance, where it lists the transactions, transaction number 1 still has the original details that we declared. Nothing is going to change on that one other than maybe the text-based fields. But the values, nominal codes, dates, they are essentially, they're cast in stone at that point. It's fixed. So what the software has done is it has reversed the effects of the original transaction. So for an SI, it's posted an SC with essentially the same details as the original transaction. So for the same customer, same nominal code, same date as the original, same values, same tax codes. So it reverses it. That's a live transaction. But what we've also got is we've got a new transaction posted to the end of our audit trail. So in this case, transaction number 3, and it's got the new details. So everything is the same. Only thing that I did change was that date. So it's got the date that I changed it to. And it's just understanding essentially when you're editing a critical field, what that impact is going to be. So you can see the difference with it being, if it's reconciled, it needs to reverse it and then repost a live transaction. If it's not reconciled, it can update the original transaction, which it does, but it takes a copy of that one and that would appear in red on the end of your audit trail. So that's why you might see some transactions that say deleted and some that say cancelled. It's all to do with their VAT reconciliation status. Hope that makes sense. Now, when we next run a VAT return, so let's say we were to run, let's say our next quarter started at the beginning of August, what it's going to do is it's going to pick up these 2 transactions. So these are going to have essentially the original, well, that one's got the original date on, that one's got the one that prior to that date that I changed it to, but these 2 transactions haven't yet been VAT reconciled. They're VATable. They've got T1 tax codes still. So they're VATable. They need to be included on a VAT return at some point. So you may have come across it at some point where you calculate your VAT return that says earlier unreconciled transactions have been found. Do you wish to include them or not? And deletions or edits is a common reason for that. Probably the most common reason. Hope that makes sense. Any questions so far? If not, we'll go back to the slides. But do keep your questions coming. If you're not sure about something or maybe something doesn't quite click for you, do let me know. So next we're going to move on to deleting transactions. So again, we'll follow the same sort of tactics. So we've entered a transaction. It hasn't yet been accounted for VAT wise. if we amend what we term a non-critical field, well, what happens is the transaction just deletes. So if we go in, we delete it, just say, right, are you sure you want to do this? So it'll delete the original transaction, and that transaction will show in red on the transactions list with the details of deleted. There's no adjustment necessary to the next VAT return because we've never accounted for that transaction on the VAT return. So if I just quickly show you that one, again, back across to my screen, we'll do a batch invoice against customer number 2. This will go for other transaction types as well, whether it's a batch supplier invoice or a bank payment or bank receipt. As long as it's not reconciled and we go in to delete it, that's absolutely fine. So again, I'll give it a slightly different value this time. So we'll do £200. I'll save it. Now you can see on the transactions list, this transaction, it's not reconciled. So it's an N in that VAT column. And if we go into delete that transaction, click delete at the bottom. Do you wish to delete this transaction? Yes. So it changes the details in this case, deleted SI. It doesn't say deleted C transaction, whatever, because it's its own transaction, as it were. And this transaction here, if I just click off it, you can see it appears in red. So red transactions essentially do not impact on your accounts. They are there for audit purposes and sort of traceability. So nice and easy, that one, when it's not reconciled, if you just need to delete a transaction. So moving on, what happens if it is reconciled? Now, if a transaction is reconciled, so you've accounted for it on a VAT return, you can't just simply delete that transaction. So you can go in, you can click the delete option, but it will then say when you click delete, do you wish to reverse this transaction? So it's not saying, are you sure you want to delete this? It's saying, do you wish to reverse this transaction? So similar to the screenshot we've got there. So it can't simply be deleted, but it can be reversed. And by clicking yes to that prompt, the software will post a reversing transaction for you. So again, if it was a sales invoice, you were thinking, well, actually, shouldn't have entered that one, but I've accounted for that on a VAT return now. If you go in to delete it and then click reverse, it will post a credit for you. Now, some things to be aware of when you're deleting transactions. It doesn't create a document or adjust any stock. So if the original invoice was generated via invoicing and credits, for instance, and it was for a stock invoice, for instance, you record stock levels. When you update that to the ledgers, it would adjust your stock accordingly. But if you were then to go and delete that transaction, it's not going to sort of adjust your stock back in. If you needed to do that, so you need to maybe create a credit note or adjust stock, then you do need to reverse it out manually. That's something to be aware of. It's not just simply a case of going in and saying, yeah, I want to reverse that, and everything's back to where it was. It's one of those considerations. You'll have heard me talk about that before if you've attended our customer and supplier corrections session. Follows a similar theme to what we're doing today. Anyway, let's have a look at that. So I'll quickly share my screen. And what I'll do is I will go and enter another invoice. So we'll do customer 3 this time. I'll just use today's date. Pop in 124, pop in a value, and I'll save it. Now I will run another VAT return just so we can have that one flagged as being VAT reconciled. I'll just go back to July again. Just include that one. And I'm going to reconcile the transaction. So we'll flag the transactions. Yes, that's what I'm after. Right, back to the transactions list. And we can see that transaction that I've just entered. it's got an R in that VAT column, indicating it's reconciled. We've even got a VAT return number. It says number 2. So that relates to, if I go back to that VAT column, on the list there, number 2. I know that's the VAT return, that it's been accounted for. That's what it's been included on. Right, back to transactions. If we go in, this transaction, this invoice, it's VAT reconciled. So if we now try to delete this one, brings up the details, we click delete at the bottom, and that's when you get that slightly different message, slightly different wording. So rather than do you wish to delete this transaction, do you wish to reverse this transaction? So if I click yes, and you can see what it's done, it's posted a sales credit. So the original transaction, number 5, it's still in black, still a live transaction, that one, but we've accounted for the VAT on it. So it's reversed it by posting a credit note. And again, that will be the same. It doesn't matter whether it's transactions against a supplier, against a bank account, it will post that reversing transaction for you. So again, that credit note, it would just be picked up when we run our next VAT return. And again, it should identify it. It'll prompt you, do you wish to include this transaction? And you would normally say yes to that prompt. Right, nice and easy so far. Now I do want to cover cash accounting. Now cash accounting, it's a little bit different. Now the key with cash accounting is it depends on the payment status of the transaction rather than if it's been VAT reconciled or not. So we'll enter an invoice in just a moment. So we'll enter an invoice, we'll try and amend it. Also, we'll try and delete them as well. But it's all to do with that payment status. If it's been paid, the invoice, or part paid, that transaction is going to be locked. So I can't delete it. I can't. And similar for editing critical fields as well. So, but there is a workaround because it's all to do with that payment status. And the workaround is to either unallocate the payment from it or to delete the payment so that the invoice is outstanding again. And then once you've made your change, you could then re-enter the payment against it. Right, let's quickly run through that one. So again, back to my screen, so we can quickly show you this one. I'm sure some of you are on cash accounting. So I'm just going to switch companies. Should have one set up for that one. There we go, right at the end. And again, what I'll do is I'll quickly knock out the transactions out of this one so we can see from the beginning. Okay, that. Right, so we're back to a blank shell basically. So I'll pop into transactions, nothing in here. So this is a cash accounting company that we got set up. So if I enter a batch invoice, and again, we'll do it for £100. We'll save it. Pop into transactions. Again, if I'm trying to amend what we term a non-critical field, so I'll just update the reference again, save it. Do you wish to post these changes? Yes, no difference there, just updates the original transaction. However, if I go to pay this transaction, so I'll quickly enter a customer receipt against it. And I'm going to show this one as having been paid in full. Doesn't matter whether it's paid in full or part paid. So we'll save that one. So we pop into transactions now. Now, for those of you that might have noticed, I did key. So I think I purposely did this on purpose. This one where I keyed in the tax into the VAT column. Just wondering if you are watching there. So it's a critical field. It's a value. I'll try and amend that value. So I've realised that there's a mistake there. So if I try and amend this transaction now, when it's paid, I'll change the reference, save it. Do you wish to post these changes? Yes. So just updates it. It's a non-critical field, so nothing to worry about there. But what if I want to amend this value? So I've keyed it in slightly incorrectly. I've popped that net value into the tax column. Honestly, that was on purpose. So we'll edit the transaction. We'll edit the split. We'll amend the value, so it's £100 plus £20 tax. Close. And this time I'm going to try and save it. Do you wish to post these changes? Yes, I do. And this is the message you're going to get probably time and time again if you're on cash accounting. And it's all to do with it's either being part paid or fully paid. So it tells me the transaction has been allocated against a receipt and VAT calculated. Therefore, this change cannot be allowed. So the way that cash accounting works is that when you enter a receipt against an invoice or a payment, depending on the type of transaction, it looks at the original VAT breakdown on that original transaction and it applies that to the receipt or the payment. And it's that transaction, the payment or the receipt, that would be picked up on your VAT return. So we can't make changes to that original invoice as it stands. So I'll just close out. Now what I've got to do is I've got two options at this stage. Now because of the critical field, in this case, it's the value that I've made a mistake with. What I can do is I can delete that transaction. I could also unallocate it. So if I just highlight this invoice, click unallocate. Do you want to unallocate this transaction? So it means that anything that's matched against it will be unmatched. So we'll now see against these two transactions that SR has changed to an SA. And in the paid column, it's got an N indicating that they're both outstanding. Now, if I highlight that transaction and if I now try to edit it, and again, I'll change the values, so what it should have been in the first place, £100 net, tax 20. We'll close, I'll save that change. Do you wish to post these changes? Yes, I do. So remember, it's a critical field, so it takes a copy of what was originally entered and it pops it onto the end of your audit trail. So that appears in red, has no impact, and that's that correction complete. Now in this instance, because I have changed the value, you can see that they don't match. So probably in this instance, the best option would have been to just highlight this transaction and delete it, and then re-enter it to get the values right. It'll pick up the new values from the original sales invoice that I'm trying to pay off. I hope that makes sense. Have a little play around with it while you set up as cash accounting, maybe in a blank practice company, if you need to find out or understand that a little bit more. Right, let's move on to journals. Any questions? Keep them coming. Find the right option. We'll get back to the slides. So journals. So a common misconception that journals don't impact on the VAT return. They may or may not. Well, journals, they can impact the VAT return. But to do that, they must use a VATable tax code. Now, by default, when you enter a journal, it will pick up your non-VATable tax code from within settings, company preferences on the VAT tab, you've got that non-VATable tax code setting. So it'll be set to T9. And that's where, when you enter a journal, that's where it's going to pick that tax code up from. So the vast majority of journals are going to be non-VATable. So maybe like a salary journal, depreciation journals, prepayments, accruals. But there may be exceptions to that. There may be times when you do enter a journal and it is VATable. And for some or all of that journal to be VATable, it needs to have the appropriate tax code. Now, the VAT element would need to be posted to either your sales or your purchase tax control account for it to be recognised as the VAT element of the journal. And the net value would need to be posted to something other than the sales or the purchase tax control accounts. And it would then be recognised as the net value. So I've got a little example for you. Well, probably one of the most common journals that our support team get asked about is things like a hire purchase or the sale of an asset. Now, yes, before anyone comments, and we get this all the time, well, why would you enter that as a journal? There will be occasions when you need to. So you're transferring things like your accumulated depreciation from one nominal code to another. And rather than enter the sale of an asset manually via a journal, you might do that as part of an invoice, but it could be just done as a journal. So although we've got an example here of a sale of an asset journal, a typical one, it's got 7 lines. Most of them use T9, but 2 of the lines use T1. So you can see the net value there on the second last line. It's going to the sale of assets nominal code. It's the net value, goes with T1, goes in as a credit value. The VAT needs to be entered on a separate line, again T1, and it goes to the relevant control account, in this case, the sales tax control account. Now, if you're not familiar with journals, and maybe you get stuck on journals and you get your debits and credits mixed up, or you just can't make it balance for whatever reason, that's quite common with things like salary journals. If you're doing it, people contacting our support team and just say, I just cannot get it to balance, and they've missed something out, then do get in touch with our support team and they'll try and work that out with you. But that's how you would get a journal to be included on your VAT return. But do, as I say, bear in mind, probably the vast majority of journals, you're going to enter with a T9 tax code. So just going back to that previous example, if we were on the standard VAT return, the standard VAT scheme, if you run a VAT return in the UK, the VAT element is then going to be picked up in box 1, and the net element is going to be picked up in box 6. Obviously, we've then done, the purchase of a fixed asset. You're going to be debiting those relevant nominal codes, and then it will be picked up in, say, box 4 and box 7. But just applying it to the example, that's how it would impact on a UK return. Now, obviously that's a UK return. In Ireland, it look a little bit different. For those of you in the UK, if you've never seen an Irish VAT return, this is essentially what it looks like. It looks a little bit more complicated, and sometimes you might feel a little bit sorry for those in Ireland because there's a lot more tax codes to get your head round as well in Ireland. So I think it's about 50 set up by default. They are very, very similar. So a little bit more complex when you're dealing with Irish VAT. But the same journal, this is how it would impact the Irish VAT return. So a sale of assets, the VAT element that you've charged, it's going to be declared in the very first box, and also in the box T1 and T3. And the net element is going to be included in the box at the bottom, so unnamed box, second last box, other than it's called total value of sales excluding VAT. So that's where it's going to reflect on there as well. But again, if you want to try things like that, do remember you've got the practice data. These days as well, you can even restore a backup of your data into the practice company. You can play around with your data in there. You want to just reset itself when you come out. Right, the final area I want to quickly pick up on, spend a couple of minutes on this one, is the option to make adjustments. Now, again, I mentioned this at the beginning, probably the vast majority of you will never ever touch this option. So it's on step 2 of the VAT return wizard. Again, it doesn't matter whether you're UK or Ireland, you've got the same option. It's just a case of you then choosing which box you want to adjust. So when you get to step 2, you've calculated the return. Normally the calculated figures, they're on the right-hand side or in an image of the VAT return with the relevant values where you can drill down, etc. So you've got that option in the make adjustments. You would just give it a click and it would then display the boxes of the VAT return that you can adjust. So you might use this to correct a past error. So maybe you're being notified by HMRC or the revenue that you need to do some form of adjustment to your next return. Or commonly, if you're on the partial exemption VAT scheme, if you're following the help centre guides, it would tell you, right, you need to calculate this and this and do a few calculations, and then you need to manually adjust your figures. The one thing to be aware of if you ever need to post adjustments is that when you reconcile your VAT return and the adjustments are then automatically posted for you, it will use your current program date rather than the date that you're reconciling up to. If you need to use the date that you're reconciling up to, so the last day of your VAT quarter, for instance, you need to change your program date before you access the VAT return wizard. But if you are in a position where you do need to make an adjustment, you would just click that make adjustment option, and then you'll get a box similar to what we've got on the screen there. So you can see the little icons, a bit like the drill down ones on the VAT return itself. You'll have a little icon in that adjustment column next to each of the boxes that potentially you could put an adjustment against. Adjustments can be positive or negative, depending on what you need to do. And when you reconcile, so once you've agreed your figures, you've posted any adjustments, when you reconcile, an automatic journal will be posted between your VAT liability and the manual adjustments nominal code. Again, if you need to play around with that one, remember you've got that practice data. And because of what it is, the adjustment, if there's any supporting documents, you can attach that to the VAT return as well. So if I just go back to the that previous slide, you can see you've got the make adjustments option, but you've also got that option to add attachments. So if you are on the likes of the partial exemption scheme, you've run reports, you've done calculations on Excel, etc. If you want to attach that to the VAT return for your personal reference, then you can do that. So nice and easy to make adjustments if needed. However, as I say, the vast majority of you will never need to do that. Stephen, you mentioned there, how do you change the program dates to put an adjustment into the VAT period? So if I just quickly share my screen there, so if you did need to do that, and bear in mind, it's probably going to need to be for one of those reasons I've mentioned. So you've been advised that you've made a mistake, or it's probably because of you maybe on the partial exemption scheme. Then to change your program date, you would go into settings, and about halfway down the menu there, you've got that option change program date. Obviously, normally your program date will just pick up your PC date when you open your software. So that's where you change it. So if you wanted that to the manual adjustment to appear in your VAT period, then that's where you would change it. You change it to that probably the last day of your VAT quarter. If it's an adjustment for anything else, things like bad debt write-off, recovering the VAT element, then you wouldn't really use the make adjustment option. You would actually post transactions to do that for you. So that's when you might post a VATable journal, for instance. And again, you would just post that with the relevant date so that when you calculate your VAT return, it picks it up. I hope that makes sense. Right, any final questions at all for us? If you do have any, quickly get them submitted. If you weren't quite with us at the beginning of the session, if you're fairly new still to webinars, just click your little speech bubble icon, which is on that toolbar down the right. It'll expand. You'll get access to that bottom box. Pop your question or your comment in. Remember to click send. Either myself, Tina, or Abby will try and pick that up for you. If anyone wants a copy of today's slides, they are available to download via the handout option. Do take that opportunity. They're not available to download afterwards. And remember, the recording of this session will be included on the follow-up email, which you'll get in around about an hour's time, along with a link to our webinar registration page and our webinar recordings page. So loads of resources there for you. So if you're more of a visual learner, get yourself signed up for the webinars or watch the recordings. Just as a reminder, loads of great information within our Help Centre. It is region specific as well. So when you go to the main Help Centre page and you click Manage Your VAT, it will then ask you, is your region GB and Northern Ireland, or is it Republic of Ireland? And then it will branch off to the relevant VAT information for your region. So again, do use that. It's a great resource, that one. Right, just about brings us to the end of the session. Quickly get those questions submitted if you've got any, but thanks for coming along. I hope you've enjoyed it. Given you a little bit more insight, hopefully increased your confidence a little bit, hopefully. If you can take a minute to complete the survey that pops up as you leave, that would be greatly appreciated. We love to read your comments about what you thought of the webinar. If you've got any ideas that you think we could use to improve the webinar, pop them on there. We love reading those comments. Ideas for topics you'd like to see covered going forward, maybe badge series you'd like us to cover going forward, let us know. If you can take that minute to complete that survey, that would be great. Your follow-up email will be with you in round about an hour's time, so do watch out for that one. Margaret, you mentioned about why is it not possible to download the handout afterwards? It's the logistics of it. The webinar software we don't that we use, it doesn't support the sending out of documents afterwards. We can attach links and things like that, but the detailed information, so relating to what we cover in the webinar, you'll find it all outlined in the relevant Help Centre articles. So it's really just that the software doesn't support that, which is why we encourage you, if you need it, do that during the session. Right, we'll end the webinar just at that point. Many thanks for coming along. Hopefully I'll see you on the quiz either tomorrow afternoon or Friday afternoon. And for those who have met that criteria to earn the badge, that should be issued towards the end of next week. So keep an eye out on your emails and hopefully you should spot that coming soon. Many thanks. Hopefully we'll see you on the other webinars soon.